Hello, everyone. Bear with me 1 second. YouTube's doing a weird thing on streaming again. I have to refresh the page in order to get the YouTube chat. There it is. And let me pop out the chat and say hello. All right, today we have a special show. We have Eric Schwartzman here, and I will introduce him formally in a moment, but I got to get through a small amount of regular boilerplate. So, first, I want to mention Magic PR, our sponsor. And it's a different kind of sponsorship. He is providing us access to press releases to conduct primary research and SEO using them. So we're not exchanging money. We're trying to set it up so that we can learn about press releases in the context of doing SEO. So thank you, Madge, for helping us do that. And check out his press releases. We recommend that you always have 3 providers in case you need big numbers of referring domains. And so this is a great one to keep in your pocket. All right. Next, I want to make a shout out to Dory Friend and all the people over at SEO Intel, formerly SIA. They're an SEO testing group, and they put on the SEO Rockstars conference, which just happened. And I know last week we talked a little bit about the great things that were said at the conference. But we didn't know if the recordings were going to be open to the public or just for sale to Dory's group. But they will be available to the public. So if you want to see those amazing presentations, including Charles's that has the Picasso of site migration processes, as well as mine, the top 10 deadliest secrets in SEO, and Lee's doom and gloom as usual. It was an amazing show.
I don't think surviving AI is doom and gloom. I think it's informative and prescriptive, sir.
So if you live in Australia and there is no way you were going to Boston and you really regret missing out on all those great presentations, this is a way to get the info so that you can stay current and you don't have to travel or buy a hotel room or take the time off work. So this is an option. It's important, I think, to help out these smaller conferences. And the reason I think it's important to help out these smaller conferences is they have boutique expert information that is not mainstream. And so we need to support that as a community or we lose that as a community. The other important thing to keep in mind is that these showrunners take tremendous risk and they oftentimes lose money doing these events. And when the turnout is low turnout, and oftentimes it's situational, pandemics, weather, time of year, a lot of things contribute to low turnout. It's very hard for them to get the motivation to keep doing it. So most showrunners have this constant pressure to give it up. And so if you want to support a boutique, expert level small event conference, this is the boutique small event one to support because this one delivers year after year after year. Lee, you have any comments on SEO Rockstars?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great conference. As always, there's the information that you get from the presentations and information you get from the presenters at the bar. So you can go, like with Charles, had a fabulous presentation on site migrations, but I know around the tables in the bar there were additional conversations about other things that weren't covered in the presentation and other ideas there. So it's more than just supporting the recordings. I think for those that are interested in leveling up their SEO, coming to these things is a great way of picking up just lots and lots of gold nuggets that makes attending these conferences worth it. If you'll come out of your shell and actually talk to people like Ted or like Charles or Terry. Honey had a presentation, so we had a lot of different speakers that were very, very accessible to people if they showed up. And this particular conference was a little smaller than it had been historically, but that also made it a little more intimate. More people around the table talking about fun SEO topics. So I had a good time.
Yeah, me too. I agree. So we'll run this slide for a few weeks, and we'll remind people that all this great content is here if you need it. All right. So Eric Schwartzman. I would classify as a contemporary SEO, but an old school PR guy. And the thing about old school PR guys, or women too, just talking out my ass here. The thing about them is that they're a disappearing breed. They're vanishing from society, and replacing them is all this social media marketing stuff. So finding influencers, influencer marketing, and lots of platform driven things instead. And what's being kind of lost is the ability to find, reach out, and communicate effectively with journalists. And so in SEO, we all crank out these press releases every day, but they all just kind of go out and disappear into the ether. And other than getting some algorithmic stuff, not much happens with them. And so Eric has agreed to come on the show to kind of debate what SEOs are doing with press releases and to point out how we got it all wrong. And before people jump on Eric's case, he helped me get into Business Insider. He opened the doors. He had interest from the New York Times on that story. So there's not a lot of people I know that turn the heads of journalists on things that you want to talk about, and that's a hard skill. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I will let
let me just add on to that just real quick. I mean,
sure.
We are largely, SEOs are largely introverts. So we think, I've got software, I go push a button, these press releases are out there, they do their work. If we think of influencer marketing, we're thinking, how can I get my software to get an influencer to do something, without actually having to make communication a part of it, direct face-to-face or any of that. So it's very much a dying art form. But Eric is a very, very social, connected guy. He's about the relationships and developing those relationships and nurturing those relationships and being a part of the give and take of those sort of live social networks as opposed to the just post something automatically. So it's a very, very different angle and very, very effective if you know what you're doing. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say today.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll warn you about these old school PR folk, and this also applies to like old school enterprise salespeople. They have a very low tolerance for BS because they have a very high capability to deliver results. And what you would find like back in the .com era is that the enterprise salespeople that are your buddy don't get numbers. And the enterprise salespeople that hate you and speak their mind and do whatever the hell they want, they tend to deliver. And so keep in mind that in this old school notion the personalities are in a way that comes from success rate. And so you got to kind of have that lens when things get heated, because he's talking from a place of doing it and getting results, and he doesn't want to suffer, you know, the running off the rails on tinfoil, and doing things that wouldn't be constructive. And so it's, in a lot of ways, when you become an expert at anything, really, you kind of get that way about that thing. And so just keep in mind that old school PR people, old school sales people, old school anything that's at that caliber of performance, I mean,
Yeah.
it comes with a different type of personality set, because they've run the gauntlet and we haven't. And it's easy to have opinions when you've never run the gauntlet. And
Well, I
so
can tell
keep
you
that in
that
mind.
I'll give Eric a piece of data. I think we've done 9 tested SEO training classes, and in that length of time, we've done hundreds and hundreds of press releases, both for our own sites, other people's sites, etc. And I think that I can only recall of one that got any sort of traction from outside interest, other than just being published as part of the link graph. So that's one, and it was a very oddball one. So I think the why some press releases generate editorial news coverage, it's like, I just assume that at 100% rate they won't, the way that we're doing it. So anyway,
Yeah,
take it away, Eric.
I'm the same way. So I'm looking forward to learning something here. So I'll let you take it away, Eric.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I met Ted and Lee and Terry at the Rockstars a year ago in Dallas. And it was sort of a decision I made to sort of take a walk on the wild side, because I had been doing everything by the book up to then and had really been a Google fanboy, and had been telling people, oh my God, don't disregard Google's guidelines, don't hang out in bad neighborhoods or you're going to get manually demoted. I really bought into Google's PR line, which is, hey, we're watching and we know what's happening. And it really was you, Lee, that opened my eyes to the fact that, wait a minute, it's a business. They probably don't have it all together. They're just trying to make us think we have it all together. And it was really through that talk you gave at the first Rockstars, and this paper that I wrote, which wound up resulting in Ted getting in Business Insider, which revealed to me this idea that organic search is really a misnomer. I mean, it's really doublespeak. It's math. Math is not natural. Math is not organic. Math is math. So to say math is organic is doublespeak. And the truth is, it implies as though Google can recognize organic behavior. But if that was true, then many of the things that you guys do to artificially manipulate rankings wouldn't work, and some of it does. The problem is we just don't really know with confidence what does and what doesn't. And that is always changing and something that requires constant testing. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about this idea of PR-led SEO. And if at any point you want me to stop and address anything specifically, we can. If you think for a minute about influencers, today influencers are people in social media that have a lot of followers. They're really demagogues. They're people who know how to tap into emotional responses to get people to engage, so that they can rise to the top of the news feed. But the original influencers were journalists, and in the B2B world, analysts. And so those were the folks that we sort of went head to head with. So when you think about public relations, you probably think about media relations. But the truth is, media relations is only one part of public relations. Public relations, the idea is stakeholder relations for an entity. Could be a company, could be a person, could be a brand. But how does that brand, person, or company relate with employees, the government, the media, customers. That is media relations. That is public relations. And media relations is the subset of that is, block and tackle with the media. And so when most people, particularly small businesses, come to a PR firm, they're coming to a PR firm because they want to get in the press. They think, oh, I'm going to hire a PR firm and I'm going to get in the press. And that in and of itself was the exercise. Well, today, if you're a savvy PR person, you realize that a byproduct of that news coverage is going to be a link from the story to whoever's mentioned in the story. And of course, if it's from a major news outlet, that is a high value link. And so if you think about something like a Wikipedia story, right? Wikipedia publishes no original information at all. Everything is justified by third-party citations. Enough third-party citations justifies a Wikipedia article, right? And a Wikipedia article is what one of the things Google uses to determine what entities are. So if you sort of if you look at it full circle, holistically like that, that's sort of the relationship between PR and SEO. PR is the road to Wikipedia article, which is the road to becoming an entity. And the quality links that you can generate through PR are going to provide air cover to justify and normalize whatever lower level link building activity you might be pursuing in other areas. So, PR really at the end of the day is media relations for most people. So we talked about press releases. So let me just pull the covers on press releases for a minute. Unless you're traded on a stock exchange, unless there is a press pool that is assigned to cover your organization because you're a government, federal government agency or a sports team, you're not getting news from a press release. Now, that's not to say a press release doesn't have value. It has tremendous value. But in the sequence of releasing news, it's the last stop. So when I am releasing news for an organization that isn't necessarily hard news, I have to figure out how to make it hard news. I have to figure out what makes news, right? So these are sort of the 5, if you boil it down to its essence, what are the 5 things that make something newsworthy? It's happening now. It's new. It's news because it's new. It's timely. Proximity. And this isn't just geographic. This is psychographic as well, right? If it's close to home, if it's close to how we make money, it's newsworthy. Conflict and controversy, always, if it bleeds, it leads. When there's violence, when people fight, we care. And that's actually baked into this show, right? You've named the show, Ted, Fight Club, because you want to get a little controversy in there and get people to, and the best episodes are when people disagree in this show.
Yeah. I'm looking at this list and I'm running down it thinking about the last press release I wrote. Was there anything timely about it? No, it was evergreen. Was there proximity of any sort? Well, I guess it was in a keyword space. That's about it. There's no conflict or controversy. Humans wouldn't be interested, so failed that one. But it was highly relevant to what I was targeting, but probably not relevant to people.
There's an interesting book by this guy, David Merman Scott, called Newsjacking. And what he does is he sort of, when he's releasing news, he sort of looks at the news climate of the day. He goes to the AP site, goes to Reuters, goes to Bloomberg, and sees what's trending. Now you'd go to Google Discover and see what's trending there. And you look at, hey, how does your news affect what's going on today? I know a lot of people who watch this show do local SEO and represent roofers and locksmiths and these types of businesses. Well, there's a time of year to sweep the roof before the rainy season. There's tornado season. How does that affect how roofs are getting built? Are they getting built differently? So timeliness can play into this stuff if you think about it that way.
So I'm thinking tactically now. So if I'm if I'm trying to help SEO someone that is doing a Austin dentist thing, should my press release maybe go find other stories about recent stories about Austin dentists and
You don't
work them
necessarily
in?
want to find recent stories. You want to tie into news trends, because at a news organization, they're assigning people to cover stories based on what's trending. And so for you to come in from left field and say, hey, do a story about this that doesn't tie in to any news beat that's already under being assigned stories or anything that's already happening, it's not going to work out for you. And there are all sorts of perennial events that happen, year round. Award season, there's entertainment award season, which ends with the Academy Awards. Well, I mean, that's when people trot out their stories about how to look good on the red carpet, how to whiten your teeth, how to have a good smile. You got to sort of think about how it ties into the news of the day from a timeliness standpoint.
So I'm going to challenge you here for a second. Looking at these categories, can you give me an example of what you might strive for that Austin dentist, and making the composition of what you're going to communicate?
I would need to research it, but my blink on it, what I'm thinking is, the cost of dental treatment has become so expensive, and people complain about it. They're shocked about it. If I really wanted to own it in that space, probably I would do some sort of a research report about what it costs for different procedures. Maybe I'd do it by zip code and do different charts and graphs and write a report with a little research about it. And then I'd put that out to the local consumer reporters, the healthcare reporters. And then I'd say, hey, my guy's available to brief you on this. That I think that's the way to take something and make it into hard news, because you have hard data.
All right, so that gave me goosebumps, because you're making an information product that journalists would want to talk about that's related to your Austin dentist.
And the cool thing is, if you think about like Upwork, between Upwork and Fiverr, you can get, like, I get PhDs in Brazil to help me with, data processing. I mean, I write, I'm going to show you some case studies of reports that I've done with original data in them that get all kinds of news coverage. But I mean, I have to do the work. So, and we'll talk about that. I mean, in terms of how much work is that versus, babysitting some of these apps that we use to run traffic or create backlinks, which are kludgy and buggy and difficult to maintain. But let's move on for now. Okay. So what, this is something we used to say. I ran promotions at the largest PR firm west of the Mississippi in all categories for many years. And we would sit around with a new client in the war room, and we would ask, how do we make them mediagenic? How do we package them so that it's going to be really easy for a writer to sit down and write the story in the 2 or 3 hours that they have budgeted to crank out a story? Because they have to crank out so many stories a day. If you give them anything too thick, they're not going to be able to get their arms around it. They're going to pass. So you've got to make it really easy and really mediagenic. So this is a great line, and I didn't invent this, but this is something that's said in PR all the time. Okay, if a dog bites a man, that's not news. But if a man bites a dog, that's news, right? So what you want to think about is, how do you sort of package the news in a way that's surprising, unusual? And a great example of this, if you want to find kind of what they are of the day, go to the AP site, and there's a news beat called oddities. And, it's really easy to sort of look at the front page of AP and say, oh, it's Trump that's getting the news. It's Palestine that's getting the news. It's Taylor Swift that's getting the news. I'm not any of those things. I'm not going to get the news. Don't use those as examples. Go to the oddities page and look at all these weird, bizarre stories that aren't driven by a celebrity or by a politician or by an act of war. And you'll get all sorts of ideas for how to package interesting ideas in a way that would make them mediagenic. Here, it's a story about a 18 karat gold toilet in Churchill's birthplace that was apparently someone tried to steal it last night. So here's sort of some good things to think about when you're considering taking a story to the media. Okay, the first thing to realize is the messenger matters much more than the message. Okay, if the right person whispers the information to the media, right, it's going to be considered at a much higher level than if someone who's not considered credible whispers that information. Another way to look at this is in controversial situations like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If someone who is seen, if someone Jewish talks about what's wrong with the Palestinians are going to write it off. If someone Palestinian tells the Jews what's wrong, or the Israelis what's wrong with what they're doing, they're going to write it off. The only way your message is going to get heard in that environment is through a member of the tribe. So if you want to get your information to the Palestinians and your information is something other than what they're getting from mainstream media, you have to find someone within their community to spread that message for you. I, for many years, worked for the U.S. Department of State. And one of the things I was involved with was these COP climate conferences that they had. I don't know if you followed those, but that's where they had these international agreements to lower climate emissions. And at the time, we were trying in this country to shore up support for those initiatives, for those global initiatives. And look at something like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. It really was a complete failure because he failed to convince anybody on the conservative side that climate change mattered, right? They all listened to their own pundits within that community. So this gets into a theory called cultural cognition, which goes like this. When there are things happening in the world that are very complex and controversial, and we feel as though we don't have the ability to really analyze all the sources and make our own decision, we trust members from our own community to guide us in those issues, and we adopt their opinions, right? So really, if you wanted to convince conservatives that climate change mattered, the smarter thing to do would be to go to service members, many of whom military commanders at the time were talking about the national security risks of being dependent on oil, that somehow is a risk to us. Well, we know conservatives support the military, so that would be a way to get them to consider an alternate point of view. At the same time, gun activists were complaining about depleted game stocks when they hunted because of forest fires. Well, if you amplify those voices to the conservative community, they're going to be more likely to be heard. And then another example is, moderate Christian clergy who were talking about environmental stewardship as being, a biblical mandate. That would be another voice to prop up. So the messenger is more important than the message. Before you even pitch a story, you have to ask yourself, what bias do I have to overcome to get this person to hear me? Because if you don't consider that first, you're going to land on deaf ears. You're never even going to get heard. First. Second thing is, and this is more true than ever now because of engagement-based algorithms, if it bleeds, it leads. Now, this was always true. The bloody story wound up on above the fold on the front page of the newspaper in the day when print news mattered. But now, these engagement-based algorithms push to the top of the news feed whatever gets the most engagement. And so it's really the business model of Meta and of Google, which no one really talks about as much with Google, and of X, to enrage, to engage. How do I get people mad so that they stay on my platform longer so that I can read them, so that I can serve them more advertising content? So these are sort of three sort of mastermind things to think about before you bring a story to market. Even if you're newsworthy, even if you're timely and prominent and you have the proximity and all this stuff, if you don't think about this stuff, you're not going to break through.
Okay, so to challenge this slide, how is an SEO going to leverage this stuff?
Well, let's talk about that in this next case study. Okay. So this is a project that I did for a winery. It's a small winery. Like, it's a very small winery. Small wineries do 5,000 cases a year. Very small wineries do 2,500 cases a year. These guys do 1,500 cases. A winery like Gallo or Kendall Jackson or one of these, major brands that you see in the market, they do millions of cases a year. Okay. These guys have a small winery. They've just stood up a website. They want some traffic. They want to sell some wine. How the heck are they going to elbow their way into this crowded market? Well, if I just put a blog on their site and say it's the winery's blog, no one's going to pay any attention to it. But if I create a blog called the Sonoma Wine Tasting Blog, and I start to populate that blog with content that is about Sonoma wine, not a house organ about their products, but news about what's happening in the Sonoma world, I'm going to start to be seen as a media outlet, even though I'm not. I'll start to be seen as one. Then I can do a report like this one that I've been doing now for 2 years, the Sonoma Wine Tasting Report. And what I do is I hire a researcher and we collect the prices on all wine tastings throughout Sonoma in each county. And we organize them by county, and we do a series of graphs and charts, and we issue this report about what are wine tasting prices in Sonoma County. We put it out just before wine tasting season when everyone floods into Sonoma to do their wine tasting, and the media loves it. I've been on the news several times for this. Here's me on KBC talking about this results of this report. I've had, a front page business page story in the San Francisco Chronicle, Sonoma Gazette. And, when you engineer a news break like this, if you can get all these things to break on the same day, which is what I do through what's called a news embargo, then it becomes a feeding frenzy because everyone else covers it after that because it was, such a big deal. So in this case, right, I am not coming to the media with a press release from the winery saying, hey, write about my wine. I'm coming to the media as the editor of the Sonoma Wine Tasting Blog. And I'm saying, hey, I have this report and here it is. And then also, in the old days, before the internet was a big deal, and yes, I'm old enough to remember that, when we were negotiating articles, when we were doing media relations and we were negotiating exclusives, because that's how you get the front page. You get the front page by saying, hey, I'm going to give this story to you exclusively, but you need to do me right. And I want to be above the fold with a photo, and I want my guy in the caption. Okay. That would be the how the discussion sounds. Now the discussion sounds, okay, I'm going to give it to you exclusively, but I want a link against this keyword in at least the first 2 paragraphs to my guy to this page. And, that's the type of block and tackle negotiation in media relations that dovetails nicely with SEO. So there's an example, Ted, of how you would sort of position yourself as a different messenger than a PR guy pitching a story in order to make news.
So I want to go granular here on some of the SEO tactics that are happening within this process.
Yeah.
So you're showing us this report, and it looks like a published hardbound book, but this is actually a PDF, right?
It is a PDF, but I mean it's just as the quality of it is as good as a news article.
And I'm gonna guess that you put links to your website in the PDF.
Of course.
All right. And then, so this is getting distributed. People are talking about it. Yep. They're posting it.
They're linking to it. They're downloading it. Exactly.
And so you hired some outside help to help you collect the data for all this wine data to create the database, so to speak. So you own the information product, and you're the only one who's redoing it every year. And
correct.
So you get known for creating this annual data set that's relevant to a geographic area, and it's timely in that there's one every year. And it's human interest because all these people are planning to come there and do a wine tasting, and they have to figure out their plan.
And I have a 3-person team to do this, okay? First, I figured out, based on government records, how to get a list of every winery in Sonoma that's licensed to serve alcohol, right? Then I give that to my overseas researcher to go to each site manually and create a spreadsheet of all the prices. Then I send that to a data scientist, a PhD, who cleanses the data and slices and dices it a bunch of different ways and asks questions and say, hey, this is wrong. What's wrong with this? Double check this. We get it right. Then I write the report based on my analysis of the data. Then I bring in a graphic designer to lay it out and make it look pretty, right? So all that happens before a press release has even been written, right? And then I write the press release, but I don't even send the press release until I've got all these stories lined up. So on the day that the story breaks in the San Francisco Chronicle, the Gazette, the Press Democrat, and Wine Business Monthly on that same day, that's when I clear the wire with the press release. Because by the time I clear the press release, it's not news anymore. In the news business, people want a scoop. They don't want the same story that everybody has. They want something new. They want something that's going to build their career. They don't want a press release that's already been distributed to everybody. So by the time you clear the wire with it, it still has tremendous value for backlinks, obviously. It's a very important part of the process, but that's why I say it's the last thing you do in the sequence of a news break.
Yeah, because you can't negotiate anymore once you release it.
It's no longer exclusive.
Yep. So this is really interesting because everything you described here to make it relevant to like agency SEO, you have SOPs you've written on doing this type of data marketing where you create data and then use it to get the media attention. You have offshore help that's doing the work, so you're doing it with VAs. They may be specialized in areas, but still you're outsourcing the work of it. And then you're negotiating, you're reaching out to these journalists to get the exclusive before it breaks. And then after the story breaks, and let me guess, there's a sliding scale on success. Like you go for the gold, and then there's the media, who
we call it the influence ladder.
Yeah. And you see how high you can get, right?
So for example, Charles is with Fox News. Fox is very influential. If you break in Fox News, all the other conservative media are going to cover it. And a lot of non-conservative will cover it too. You're going to get a lot of coverage. If you break in the Muskegon Monitor, not so much. However, if it was really juicy and it was local to Muskegon Monitor, it might make sense to break there. So there's all sorts of ways to play the news break strategy, but typically it's a snowball effect. It gathers snow rolling downhill. So you want to start with the most influential outlet. So that's why I went first to the New York Times, and they did respond. They passed, but they responded. Usually they don't respond, but if you package it right, they will respond to you.
The interesting thing about this is like another direction coming in from a flank on content is king and right quality content, because this is coming at it going, well, not quite. It's not quite about the flowery language you author. It's about getting a good data set and making good analysis and having
well, in one case, Ted, but in this case, there was no data set at all. So this is another white paper that I did based on a talk that Ted gave. There was no data here at all. This was no data. There was no cleansing. It was just me writing a paper about a talk that Ted gave and dovetailing it with some of the things that are happening around AI and technology and communications today. And with this a white paper. We secured this story in Business Insider. It links to Ted. It links to me.
And I would like to connect some dots. This news story, and you can go and read this news story on Insider. Um, this news story is the exact same thing that allows me to teach people how to get infinite SEO leads. So the exact same thing that these people are exploiting to sell drugs on any website through Google, it's the same problem that allows me to find infinite numbers of broken websites that need SEO help and how to fix them.
But let's switch gears for a minute, Ted, because we don't have that much more time, and there's another direction I want to show here.
Okay.
The truth is, you don't really have to get news to make news, right? You can actually make your own news right now. So this is a chart of companies that are ranking, e-commerce companies that sell hats online that were ranking when I started an initiative for an e-commerce hat seller. And you can see I've numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are their direct competitors. And you know, what most of these people were doing to drive organic traffic is they had blogs on their site. And so on the left-hand side is a blog for a company called 10th Street Hats. And on the right-hand side is a real news site for a fashion blog called Refinery 29. And if you just look at the differences, just in the typography between how they're laid out, I mean, it's obvious that one is a house organ and one is a news site, right? So look at the blog, right, for 10th Street. It's got a headline only. The Refinery 29 has a headline, a subheadline, a category, an author byline. It's got a celebrity photo. The house organ has what looks like is a catalog shot. I mean, there's nothing newsworthy about it. And it's like they think, oh, well, I'm just going to put a blog on my site and I'll just package it like my catalog content and it'll be newsworthy. But it doesn't work that way, right? If you want to make news, you got to look like news. And here's what news looks like. You know, this is thought about. New York Times does an eye track study to see what captivates you on the screen longer because that makes them more money. And so if you want to lay out a story that looks like news that that doesn't bounce people, it's got to be laid out right. It's got to look right. And so what I did for these guys, and let me just go back here, is I created a site called The Hat Walk. And The Hat Walk was a media site about celebrity hat fashions. And the truth is nobody was covering that. People would do on fashion sites a story about hats here and there, but there was no one site about celebrity hats. And so we created this site called The Hat Walk. In this case, the story is J-Lo makes women's leather cowboy hats the next it piece. And this is a story about her wearing it to the costume gala at the Met. And you could see when you search J-Lo hat, you know, our story is ranking next to the Mirror, next to Yahoo. And then what we did is we embedded the link women's cowboy hat in the third paragraph you see there. That linked back to the women's hat page on the e-commerce store. And sure enough, we were ranking #1 for women's cowboy hat, right? So in this case, we're making our own news. We've created our own news site. We're making our own news. This is legitimate news. It's editorial. It's not a house organ. We're not talking about our hats, but we're creating this content, which is interesting. People are linking to it. They're looking at it. And so that traffic and that influence is being then passed over to the e-commerce site to get the rankings going there. And I'll show you.
Can you go back to that 1 second?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this right here, if you're out there on the internet watching this video, this slide right here is an SEO strategy all by itself. So using Google News to make the story links to the site you're trying to rank, and you're tying in the context of the news search to the context of the news article, the anchor text in the article linking back to a contextual target.
And I have more examples. I have another slide here to just show you a bunch of these so you can see how well this worked. So here for Johnny Depp hat #1, Pharrell hat style #1, Brad Pitt cowboy hat #1.
So if
here's a little tip. So you see this image of the 3 different images together there?
Yep.
That feeds through in the schema to the search results. Gets the click every time when there's 3 images like that instead of 1. And we learned that through trial and error, but that was huge for us. So we started to get all the traffic just from the thumbnails that had the 3 looks together like that.
Yeah, so if you're in an e-com niche that's very specific, like hats, and you're wondering, well, how can we do this in a very specific niche? I mean, this is a good recipe. This could apply to a lot of things.
And the way I sort of think about it is when I'm with a client and I'm trying to figure out what the content strategy is, I ask myself, where is the content vacuum online? Where is there no information that people want to make purchasing decisions? There's so much garbage online. There's so many people creating ChatGPT blog posts that are SEO that have 0 value. The only value is topical relevancy passing. That's it. They have no human value. There's no interesting idea to it. But if you can actually be creative and come up with a site like this, I mean, for this, I had a staff of around 7 or 8 freelance writers. I would brief the stories. I would give them the photos. I would have them write them. And then I would publish the stories and SEO them. And I mean, this was gangbusters. I can tell you this was the result of this. So this is in 10 months. That is December to December. Obviously, e-commerce is cyclical. E-commerce is always up in December. So to compare, September to December is foolish. You have to compare December to December in e-commerce because that's when things pop. And you can see what we did here. And this is organic search revenue. These are dollars. So, and right now I can tell you these guys who were nowhere with those 4, they now dominate search in their category. And it's largely because of this.
So Lee, what are your thoughts on this strategy of make your own news? What do you think of it?
There's a couple of things that are interesting. First, I love any sort of graph that triples during the high season. That's a nice number, and that's basically what he's showing here is that the traffic has tripled. Having your own, just from an SEO standpoint, the hat blog or the hat news site, I guess would be more appropriate. It's a great relevant link, but he's also doing it in a way that it's attracting other links and traffic, probably from higher profile, higher value sites than what we would build naturally with tools or things like that. And he's going to get real people that are clicking over to see this stuff. I like the strategy. I mean, it's a great way of kind of sideswiping into where the people interest is and saying, hey, come over here to my site.
What do you think, Charles? You do some news stuff in SEO.
Yeah, dabbling a little bit. No, this is amazing. I can tell you actually from experience, so this is going back at least 10 years. We did something similar to this hat walk blog for an e-commerce company I worked for. They were Halloween costumes. And the company who helped us build it, we had an outside company help us build it. The funny thing is we used to get our competitors reach out to that site to try to get links on that site.
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm constantly getting pitched for these sites by competitors who their PR people don't even realize that it's being run by who it's being run by.
Yeah. And I see this when speaking with journalists and editors here, how much content has to be produced. And so Eric's point of making sure that it's packaged, making sure that you're I don't want to say doing their job for them, but you're making it very easy for them to understand, hey, this is what makes this unique. This is why my readers would be interested in it. Because that's always a question folks ask is why would our customers want to be interested in an article like this?
So whenever I'm pitching news, when I'm pitching TV news, local news, my first line is always, I got to package it all, but I always say, I'm going to get you in and out quick. I got parking for you. You're going to come right in. You're going to get your story. You're going to be out of there in 15 minutes because they got to do a broadcast. They don't have all day for this. So if you can play to that, the fact that they are working on economies too, that will definitely help you. Now, it's still got to be newsworthy. You still got to think about all these other things. But if it's too thick of an issue and it takes too much time, that's an investigative report. No one's got 3 months.
So, Eric, there's a fairly important question over on YouTube. Somebody wants to know, how did you get the right to use the celebrity photos for your hats?
Great question. So go to the market and go to the magazine rack. And if you go to the magazine rack, you'll see Indiana Jones special collector issue. And it'll be a picture of Harrison Ford, and there'll be a bunch of file photos that are packaged in there with a bunch of real thin editorial. Well, it's media. They have a right to print that because it's the media. They're file photos, so why wouldn't they print it? So there's all sorts of photos out there that are being trafficked and sold through photo bureaus. Okay, one of them is called Getty Images. Okay, they're a big photo bureau, but there are many others. And these guys are dealing in the business of publicity photos. They sell the photos. Now, you can't use those photos for advertising, but you can use them for editorial purposes. So I can't take those photos and put them on a product page and sell a hat, but I can put them on a news site with a story. So keep in mind, I have to have a separate organization that's a news organization. I have to file a separate corporation to do that. Oh, now you're thinking, right? You might actually create a real organization. That's a news organization. You might actually run ads on that aren't all yours so that you can show that you're a news organization. Well, there's plenty of ways to put ad feeds on a blog, right? So now you're thinking like a publisher. You're not thinking like a marketer or a PR person. And that's how you do it.
All right. And what services do you offer? I see you have your contact info up. What should people contact you about? Who can you help?
I mean, I do public relations, I do content marketing, and then I also present to executive forums, conferences, and events. So that's what I do. If I can help you with that, here's my contact information. I also wrote a book about my strategic methodology, my proprietary methodology for going to market via digital, and it's called The Digital Pivot. And if you want to download a free copy of the book, you can do so at the link there.
And it's also in hardbound too, right?
You can get it on Amazon, and you can get it everywhere books are sold. It was a bestseller when it came out 2 years ago. It is not a tactical guide. It is a strategic guide. It's an overview of how to sequence the events. Because the truth is, if you do things in the wrong order, it takes a lot longer, right? I liken it to building a house, right? You got to dig the trenches for the drains before you pour the concrete. If you pour the concrete before you put the drains in, you got to bust up the concrete and start over. And really, I think web marketing is very similar to that. People who are all busy on social with a site that doesn't convert is an example of that. You're spending all this money on social, you're bringing all the people to the site, and they're not converting. Well, shouldn't you maybe clean up the website first? Or, people who are, doing a bunch of PPC, but they haven't done SEO. I mean, that to me is ridiculous. Maybe if you got a lot of cash, okay, but shouldn't you really figure out your conversions organically before you pour gas on the fire. So that's what the book's about. The book lays out a sequence of events, and it organizes media by types. And I categorize owned media, shared media, earned media, and paid media. And my prescription is a go-to-market strategy in that order.
Yep. And keep in mind, people, this is a free ebook. So this is a gift. He's not even asking you to pay him. And so, and it wasn't written by AI, was it? This predates AI.
No, man, I really worked hard on this book. I'm really happy with it. I think I did I mean, it was a bestseller, and I think I did a good job. This is really the book for the non-PR person, really even the non-marketing person, because there's a lot of great books about each discipline. There's good books about SEO, good books about advertising, good books about content marketing, good books about PR, but I didn't see a good overview book that sort of covered it all for a general business reader without a lot of jargon. And so that's why I wrote this one.
Nice. All right, let's get into some questions with the last few minutes we have here. I know we have a few questions already. Let's see. Ted, many moons ago, you had a good approach to tracking ROI from organic search for client SEO. Do you have an updated approach to that now, or any insight to point in the right direction? Well, most of my ROI from organic involved revenue attribution. And so you'd have to set up your analytics platform, whichever one you're using, to be able to record revenue from organic sources. And so in the Google Analytics world, you're trying to attribute your conversions and your order amounts, just the total cart gross revenue, to the organic Google, organic Bing, and other sources of organic. So you're trying to attribute revenue to those source medium combinations and the analytics stuff. And when you do that, it does a couple of things. One is it puts your SEO in a language that the executive team speaks. So now you're talking contribution to bottom line. And so that's important, that you start speaking the language of the business. The other thing is you stop doing rank tracking, which on a large scale enterprise, very time consuming and not very effective in terms of telling how it's helping the business. So when you start reporting on those organic dollars instead of organic rankings, now you're saying, hey, we did this change and it increased gross revenue by this much. And that's a much better gauge. And that revenue for the overall health of the website, it's a much more important indicator, because if anything is wrong at any part of the process, it'll show up in revenue. So if you have, insulting content, that'll hurt revenue. If you have a server that's throwing errors, that'll impact revenue. If you have hackers attacking the system and doing denial of service, that shows up in revenue. So revenue is one of the most important KPIs, because it best characterizes the overall health of the whole ecosystem. And so, it's a hard thing to set up, many months to get it dialed in and working properly. But when you do, it's next level SEO for sure.
And just to put a cap on that, you have to really take the time to get it set up right, because what's happening now is all these different tools, email marketing platforms like Klaviyo, Meta's ad platform, Google's ad platform, everyone tries to take credit for the sale. And so, you wind up seeing, wait a minute, I didn't sell that much. You add up all the numbers, you didn't sell that much. Well, that's because Meta's trying to take credit for what Google's trying to take credit for what Klaviyo's trying to take credit for. So you really do have to warehouse the data and figure it out on your own, or you won't have any accurate data. You cannot trust the platform that you're using to run the ads.
Yeah, and you actually can't trust source medium. I mean, it mostly gets it right, but whenever there's problems with the data, Google just prorates statistically. And so if you put the referring domain and a custom dimension in your analytics data, you'll see that, something will come in from Google search, but for some reason, Google will just attribute it to Facebook. Not a lot of it, but whenever there's issues, it goes to this statistical attribution to try to do error correction proportionally. And so some amount of even your source medium data is bullshit. And so, yeah, it all comes down to, log the data, and then you need to have checks and balances on the data to prove or disprove its accuracy. All right, next question. How to determine how many supporting pages in a cluster you need to power up a money page? This question is probably better answered by others, and the reason being is I'm really big into minimum viable SEO right now. So my answer is, if I can rank to number 1 in Google without the cluster, why would I do that? That's just eating into profits. It's not to say it doesn't work. It's just that a lot of things that work aren't necessarily worth doing depending upon what you're trying to do. Lee, what do you think about this idea of how many supporting pages in a cluster?
I think it's the wrong question, honestly, because even if you could answer that, there's not a great analytical technique to sit there and say, oh, for this particular thing, you need 6 pages. For this one, you need 10. For this one, you need 2. There's not a great way of methodology for determining and calculating that. And to come up with a methodology that would allow you to answer the question that way would be cost prohibitive for any, single site or group of sites. So, and you're looking for a magic 8 ball almost for something like that. So I would say just add some pages and keep adding until you get the result you need.
And keep in mind, you get naturally forming clusters too, because you have your top navigation, that's a cluster. You have your footer navigation, that's a cluster. You have your related product carousel and your best sellers and your similar products. Those are clusters. You have your related posts, that's a cluster. You have your content links, that's a cluster. So you're talking about, well, what if I added one more cluster of, entity related posts that only went upwards and perfect link geometry? And I wonder, is that really the massive game changer, or is that adding 7% extra benefit and taking a lot of time? And so I worry about that, because in minimum viable SEO, I don't want to do a 7% lift. I want a double-digit lift.
Right.
What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I know a lot of people I have nothing against these cluster ideas. I just often, and you've already kind of touched on it, Ted, is that folks have other gaps. There's other huge gaps in your SEO. And that's the first thing I like to look at. Like, what aren't we doing that everybody else is doing? And when you find those gaps and fill them first, you'll find that some of this other, for lack of a better term, more exotic stuff or more in-depth stuff isn't necessarily needed. And then you get to the point where you're like, okay, do I need to be number 1, or is number 2 okay? Yeah, everybody wants to be number 1, but I'm saying, is it worth, to your point, Ted, about the minimum viable, is it worth the extra energy and cost that will take?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, totally believe it works. Totally believe it's better than my clusters. I concede that.
Definitely.
But yeah, is it that much better that it's worth the cost? That's the question I would want you to ask. Do you use keyword planners? Start with URL tool for SEO. I get curious. I don't use it regularly, but I occasionally plug something in and see what it says. And then oftentimes I either groan or chuckle. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. But it's not a tool I use with any regularity. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, it's good for seeing what Google thinks your page is about. You throw that URL in there and say, hey, what do you think it's about? I think I've done a good job of writing about, emergency plumbing, and it comes back, oh, you should rank well for cat feeder. I'm like, well, maybe I didn't do as good a job as I thought I did.
And that's the reason I ought to take it more seriously. That application right there, I think, is a gold nugget drop. So kudos on that, Lee. Let's see. For local, I want to lift a county page, made 15 town pages. I tried a silo, but it didn't move the needle. Counties are hard to rank, aren't they? Aren't they notoriously hard to rank? Because Google doesn't really quantize in that segment.
Yeah, it's not one of the from my testing, it's not one of the ones that Google prefers. It likes city, zip code's okay. It likes state. It certainly understands neighborhood well, but these, some of the intermediate ones like, counties and sometimes territories, it doesn't do as well. They don't seem to be as, prominently impactful in local stuff.
Yeah, I think county SEO, like if I had to do it, it would largely be an exact match game for me. I would try to get exact match pages with the exact match keywords, including the exact match county. And that would probably be the core of my strategy on that.
But there are only a couple of places where I know that that really comes into play, and one of them's in Eric's backyard. There's a lot of things that are done county level, in the LA area, and there's a lot of things in New York that are done county level. But outside of those two exceptions, I've found it to be more problematic than helpful.
Because that's how people search in those areas. They're searching the counties, whereas in Oklahoma or Iowa, people may never search based on the county, based on their town or
Yeah.
the neighborhood where they know, oh, this is this region or this area.
Yeah.
And Google knows that.
Another problem with counties. Usually there's a county and then there's also a city in the county that has the same name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have that a lot in Jersey. Yeah.
All right. What's the best way to hide PBNs if we want to build one? I think honestly the best way is hide in plain sight. Be plausible enough that everyone gives you a pass. And don't do things that are so over the top that it would draw the kind of scrutiny you wouldn't want to draw.
Yeah, Eric just gave you a great example of that with his, hat walk site.
I would say, it's going to take you the same amount of time to do a PBN that's got crappy content as a PBN that's got good content. So why not just do a personal blog that's got good content on it? Then you don't have to hide it.
And should we use different domain registrar, hosting, IPs, etc.? Generally not. You would have to be doing some seriously bad stuff for that to be important. Most of the time, even when we're doing like large scale testing and trying to reverse engineer the algorithm, we don't even do that stuff for that. And so, if you're doing something where Google's gonna try to make scorched earth out of you everywhere they can find you, you're doing something pretty bad. So just don't do something that bad. No one should have to turn you or reduce your website to scorched earth, because what are you doing to warrant that? If you're just putting out information that's arguably not the best, that's not a crime. That's free speech. That can hide in plain sight. Let's see. Did the photo one. Clint in the audience again, listening while he works. He said he just finished reading Eric's book and says it was a really good read. And that's high praise from Clint Butler. Let's see. I have a website that I haven't published on for a few months and it started dropping. Usually that's one of two things. That's you're losing your backlinks, so whatever link building you did is starting to fail. Or your competitors are moving past you. So you stayed stationary and they didn't. They continued to tune in advance. Short of that, I would need very specific information to guide you any better. Is it essential to keep posting and writing new, fresh articles? It does if it's like a Google News site, but if it's just a blog on the web, it's to your advantage to keep growing. But keep in mind that there are people that have made millions on blogs that had 50 posts. So Backlinko, Brian Dean, sold it for 10 million or something like that. Had 50 posts. So you don't need to crank out 1 million pages. If you can do 50 good ones and sell it for 10 million, that's pretty good. What do you think, Lee?
It's an interesting one on that because I published this is over a year ago. I published a mass site just as a test on something, and it came up, had a bunch of pages indexed, and then back down. But I was checking yesterday. I stumbled across it on a Quora report, and a good chunk of it's back up now, and it is utter gibberish. So, I don't know about the freshness piece because I haven't tested it, but it would seem that, if you're trying to get real people and organic traffic to keep increasing, that you would want to keep publishing and keeping your audience happy. But there's something to be said for publishing all at once.
Don't sell your test site short. It aged like a fine wine.
It absolutely did.
All right. Let's see. European and Australian typically search the main city rather than the townships.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Let's see. Have you seen any of the recent unredacted antitrust stuff from Google? Yes, I have. And like for a long time, we theorized that Google had a clickstream back channel for recording things. And what's interesting is some of the things they said that they're interested in monitoring would imply that they would have to have a clickstream back channel. And so I think that's a very problematic thing for them to defend. So even if they had all the legalese clauses and people opting in on doing it and it's all tucked away, having the public know exactly what Google is recording and this notion of, just trust them to anonymize it. And then what can you do with that anonymized data? I mean, that too needs to be talked about. But this is, Google said they're interested in things like, did people scroll the page? All right, so unpacking that, they're talking about when you logged into your bank to check your bank balance and you saw your bank balance, did you scroll the page? Or when you went to that adult website and you picked a category, in that category, did you scroll the page? This is what they're talking about recording. And so they're getting all that data and they're storing it and they're using it for business purposes. And that's freaking terrifying. Now, do we know that they're doing that? No, we don't know. But that's the implication of Google's interested on scroll engagement on pages that are outside of Google. And so if that is the thing that they're doing, that raises very serious privacy concerns. So I've saw that, thought it was remarkable. Brings up a lot of questions. Let's see. How good is Cora to rank products and categories from ecom? You know, I'm born of ecom. All of my skills are in that arena. It's the tool set I wish I had in ecom. And when I left ecom, I made the tool set I wish I had in ecom. So it's literally what I would use. But I make the software, so I'm a bit biased.
Excuse me.
If you do try out the software, be sure to book the free training. I'll teach you how to use it, and I'll do it specifically for ecom. So the training's free when you sign up. Let's see. Lee, what do you think about the antitrust stuff?
I've seen just a little bit of it because I just got back from Rockstars, but the little pieces that I saw were interesting. I knew about the user stuff because we'd talked about it, for several years now, but also indications that the system is not as sophisticated as people believe. That's kind of their own admission. There's certain things that we can't do. So they're kind of busting their own Google is so smart and saying we're actually not, there's certain things we don't really understand a page, not in the way people think we do. So if people really read into that and understand that, a lot of the SEO theories of the day evaporate.
Yeah, one of the things about the scrolling thing is I specifically tested that. Like I made CTR bots that would go to the page and scroll to the bottom slowly using a mouse to actually invoke the scroller, and I tested that pretty thoroughly, and it never moved the needle. And so that's making me think on this information that either that is more recent than my test, so it's a very new development, or perhaps when they mentioned user engagement, like scrolling the page, that was an example of the kind of thing they're interested without actually mentioning the actual thing they're interested in.
Right.
And so there's always that possibility too.
That's a lot of data to collect. If you collect, here's the browser, it went to this particular page, that's one level of collection.
Here's
and then
the thing, though. The engineering, it actually works. So on the engineering, they're going to store one, maybe two floating point numbers. And so the one number they would get on the scrolling is, on average, people scrolled to what percentage. So all the way to the bottom is 100%. So between 0 and 1, how far down the page did they get? And then the second number they would optionally do is how fast did they get to that point? Was it a slow progress there, or was it quick?
Mm-hmm.
And so two numbers. So I think
once you have those numbers in a data warehouse, analyzing them and incorporating them back into the ranking stuff, because you can keep collecting data all day, and that's, how valuable is that particular piece of information relative to other.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not all pages require scrolling too. So yeah. I mean, some do in a small amount. So a short page, you'd get to 100% really quickly, but on a skyscraper article, it's probably very hard to get to 100%. And so I wonder if that would be useful data because it would be biased against shorter or longer form content just on the onset.
Right.
Let's see. What about testing something like pogo sticking behavior? I believe that's been tested quite a bit, and it's a category of negative SEO attack. To its current applicability of how well it works, I'm not sure. It would have to be retested. But I do know that there's an argument to be made that it has worked in the past. Let's see. I think that's it. So we'll wrap it there. Anything to announce, guys? Any upcoming events?
Just the conference in January that we're at, and that, you know, the details of that are coming out soon. So,
and when does tested SEO training pick up again?
February. So we'll go through the holidays and give people a break, seeing my face for a little bit.
And when I mentioned at the beginning of the show about how important it is to help these small conferences like SEO Rockstars, I'd like to point out that behind Honey is the banner from SEO Rockstars, and she's obscuring tested SEO training, who paid to help support these events. So we practice what we preach here, and I want to thank Honey and Lee for sponsoring that event. So that's awesome.
No problem.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
For showing up and sharing his information.
What was that, Terry?
Eric. Yeah.
Thank Eric for showing up and sharing his information. Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you,
for
Eric.
having me, guys. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, everyone.